Hello world, welcome to the 45th Climate Change Awareness Emergency Rally. It is October 18th, 2019 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Probably by myself today. Tanya has to work and I have stuff to do at 11 o'clock, so that's why I made it 9 o'clock a.m. here. Not sure if Wilma will show up, but it's all we can count on anymore. It's just the three of us, and Gettysburg is kind of asleep and sleepwalking into oblivion, as is the United States and then the world. It's a shameful thing that what we're doing to the world. We have no leaders that understand the real severity of the situation, including the President of the United States, the Senate, the House of Representatives, all the candidates running for president for the Democratic nomination. They really don't understand the severity of what's happening in the dire situation we're in. If a truck comes by, I'll pause. But it's a really horrible situation right now. CO2 is 408. The biggest news... Wait a second. The biggest news is in the Arctic, which the media has not covered hardly at all. You don't see it on national news. Probably don't see it on world news anywhere. Methane by the bucketfuls are escaping out of the shallow Russian seas. And this is what Shakova scientists predicted a few years ago, back in 2012, that we could have a 50 gigaton burst. Well, that hasn't happened yet, but what's happening is an indication is we're on our way to that happening. They said there's so much methane coming up in these shallow seas that you can just scoop down a bucket and just pick it up bubbling. Methane is, maybe some of you know, most of you don't know, is a greenhouse gas that initially for the first 2 years is anywhere from 150 to 200 times more potent than is CO2 in the atmosphere. There's usually less of it, so it's counted in parts per billion, but in this case it's 16 parts per million. So that transfers over to somewhere around 2,400 parts per million CO2 equivalency. Well, we're at 408 parts per million right now, the world is, and safe is 280 and below. So 2,400 parts per million plus the additional CO2 in the atmosphere. Up in the Arctic, you're talking 2,800, 2,900 parts per million. This is a life-cooking event, and it's not just the heat, it's also the survivability of crops and many other things. There's feedback loops associated with it. So the feedback loops up in the Arctic right now are fires break out and they catch the peat on fire, which also puts more CO2 in the atmosphere. The permafrost is melting on the land as well, and that puts more CO2 in the atmosphere as well as methane. So it's a huge issue going on up in the Arctic, and if we don't save the Arctic and somehow it gets cooled down again, which won't happen unless we bring the CO2 down, we're in deep trouble as a species. As I said, not only because of heat, but because of food. Food insecurity is going to be a huge issue coming up. In the United States right now, you had the floods in the spring in the Midwest, and it continued in the summer. And the farmers couldn't even get in their fields. A lot of farmers lost their crops or couldn't get in at all. And the ones that did get in, up in North Dakota, South Dakota, well, they recently got a foot of snow before they even got their crops in. So that's more crop failure. And these are the things that the media in the United States is not reporting. And it's really sinister what's going on. Our media is owned by 6 families, 6 corporations, and they determine and dictate as to what news is covered. So you got a bunch of idiot news, you got a bunch of idiot reporters, and they don't have a clue what's happening. They're a bunch of kids that come out of college or whatever and continue on their jobs for 10, 20 years, and they aren't schooled in science. So it's a shame they don't interview real scientists and people that know what's happening and can give you the actual truth. Another feedback loop going on right now is in the oceans. You get the oceans heating up as a result of the CO2 greenhouse warming effect. So the oceans warm up, which causes a disruption in the AMOC in green. It's a whole bunch of feedback loops. You can't even get into all the situation. Anyways, the basic idea is that Greenland melts, throws more non-saline, non-salty water into the ocean, does not sink as deep, breaks down the AMOC conveyor belt going throughout the oceans. With the conveyor belt broken down throughout the oceans, then the Gulf Stream breaks down, the Caribbean heats up, the East Coast United States is going to warm up exponentially as well as flood. And so you get a heating, you get the dying of fish because there's less oxygen in the water because the water's warmer. This is just crazy. I could go on for an hour as to all the feedback loops that's happening, and I wouldn't even begin to cover them all because I'm not all that knowledgeable about all that stuff. So you get the fish die-offs, and then you get the coral reefs that die off because not only is the water warmer, which the coral reefs don't like a lot of times, it's also acidic. So you get carbonic acid in the waters from the CO2 that combines, and it breaks down the shells of the pteropods, which are the tiny little sea creatures that are shell-based that rely on a non-acidic ocean. So their shells get torn apart and eaten up. So therefore, the upper fish don't have food to eat. So it's this whole thing going on in this whole system, and we eat fish, and therefore we won't be able to eat fish in the future, is because we're overfishing them. There's less oxygen in the water, and the carbonic acid is breaking down the basic layer of the base of their food system. So now in the Amazon, this is just nothing but bad news, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you the truth, this is what's happening. The Amazon, you get not only people burning it down, but you also got people cutting down the rainforest. So you got rainforest for profit to get at the minerals underneath, causes soil erosion. Eventually the rainforest will reach a tipping point where it just becomes a savanna. And since it's on the equator, my guess is it'll become a desert as well. Then you got also the rainforest in Africa, which also will overheat. The people are burning that down and slash and burn because they want to make a living, and they can. So it's governmental policies which encourage this burning down and the slash and burn techniques. So now you got the Thwaites Glacier, which is on the edge of collapse into the ocean. So if that one goes, it raises the sea level up, I don't know what it is, a foot or two or something like that. Then you also have the glaciers in the Himalayas and the Alps, which are also melting. And what's bad about that is that the Himalayan glaciers provide water for, I think it's like 3 billion people in Asia rely on the rivers that are there. Yeah, it'll rain, but what'll happen is instead of a slow runoff, the rain blows through the rivers and goes out to the ocean, and then the rivers end up dry unless they stay, full of water, which they won't if there's no glaciers to feed them. And also in the Alps, you got the glaciers failing. Mount Blanc has a glacier that has the potential of sliding into part of Italy or whatever, so it's a huge amount there. The glaciers also hold the soil together and the mountains together. So when they go and it rains and the weather changes back and forth, you're going to have rock slides, and mountains are basically trying to fall down throughout the course of their lives into the ocean and reach sea level. So if the ice isn't holding it together, then the mountains fall down. Then you got these rock slides that imperil people as well as crops and farmlands. So the argument in the United States is that why should we control CO2? Why should we back off? Because India's not going to do it and the other countries aren't going to do it. Well, if we had that attitude, or they had that attitude, they would say, well, why should we do anything? Because the United States isn't doing anything. The United States is the second largest emitter in the world as far as CO2 goes. The United States is the largest emitter per capita, meaning per person as far as CO2 goes. So we're the linchpin that determines which way the world's going to go as far as survivability. We just can't continue on this way. We have no moral compass as far as leading the world. It's all about greed and getting what I want, getting to work, doing my stupid ass job that isn't going to be here in 10 years because we're probably not going to survive with this attitude. You get these groups like, hey Wilma, how you doing? Yay, Wilma's here. You get Extinction Rebellion in London, which people disagree with their technique as far as turning out and blocking the roads, but they're trying to draw attention to the fact that humanity is on the brink of extinction, and if we keep this up, we're definitely going to have a real issue, food insecurity, and possibly going extinct. Why go to a job every day if it's not going to be there in 10 years? I realize you got to pay the bills and we're all stuck in this system, but somewhere things have to break. And if we don't break now from our situation and change our politics altogether, we will be broken. Nature will take its toll on us and exact its ugly revenge and get us back for what we're doing to the environment and to the atmosphere. Greta Thunberg, who's that 16-year-old girl in Sweden, who's going around the United States right now in her electric car donated by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is also leading protests. And her theory and her accurate statement is, why should kids bother going to school if they're not going to have a future? So, it's a hard thing to say, but you look at your children and they could have a serious problem surviving after 10 years. You got food insecurity. That's what's happening in Central America. Families are leaving not only because of the politics, but also because it's food insecurity. They've gone through a severe drought, and of course you would pick up your family and leave Central America, and go to another place. And our Christian nation, so-called, puts up these walls and borders, and rather than inviting people, which has been the lifeblood of the United States, we're putting up walls and cages and everything, and keeping people away. We've become a real bully of the world, and we're really not a good nation right now. We can change our ways, but right now our behavior is just absolutely atrocious. So, I think by 2026 all hell is broken loose, and we're talking 7 years. We don't have 12 years to get on this, as the Democrats keep saying, the Democratic candidates for president. We absolutely do not have 11 years. We don't have 9 years. We had 12 years 30 years ago. Okay, so we're not doing what we need to do to get things done. Our country is just based on total fossil fuels, big trucks, big SUVs, and just burning up whatever and partying like it's 1999. We can't do that. The farmers, as I said, in the Midwest are starting to realize that climate change is going to directly affect them. So one and done, for these protests aren't going to do it. Well, this is my 45th one of these things, and I absolutely really don't like doing this, but I know I have to do it. And if no one ever turns out, so be it. If no one watches these videos, that's okay. So, I got to do the right thing and do the right things along the way and try to do my best. We're all hypocrites as far as, our CO2 use and everything, and oil and whatnot. But you got to try to make things right. And you got to also not think that one protest a year or one protest every 5 years is going to do it. This is a daily pressure we're going to have to do. We are at war with ourselves, basically. And our politicians are not getting it. Local, federal, state, any politician does not get it. There's no push. And the media does not report as to what's happening. You will die. Your children will die. And I hate to say this, it's the absolute truth. We need to get on this so we can, avert that possibility, or at least mitigate the circumstances. I really suggest before 2026, when all hell breaks loose, we get on this. Like, it has to be a daily thing. I feel like a parent that just keeps going on and on about this. You need to do this, you need to do that. But you do, and I'm sorry to say this to you, but it's the truth. It's the hard truth, and nothing but the truth. So next week's rally is October 25th here in Gettysburg, PA at 9 a.m. Hopefully I didn't bore you all, and I'll catch you next week. Bye.